have a lot of divisiveness in our country right now. Have you all noticed this? Some people tell you it's because of social media. We speak to each other in ways that are frankly mean, and I think we say things, because we're hiding behind a screen that we wouldn't necessarily say if we were face to face. Other people say it's about politics, conservative and liberal. Still others will tell you it's money, the haves and the have-nots. I say yes, yes, and yes to all of that. But there's an underlying cause that we're not really paying attention to. Now, I spent 30 years working in corporate communications at major media companies, and I also have a Ph.D. in psychology. I am trained to look for the underlying cause and then to use communications to help solve it. So I'm going to tell you today that the underlying cause is your generation. And for those of you who just said to yourself, did she just tell me my age is the problem? Yes, that's actually exactly what I said. And the reason is because for the first time ever, we have 5 generations in the United States who are active in society, in politics, and in business, because people are living healthier, so they're living longer and they're staying active longer. I mean, have you seen an 80-year-old today? My mother's 80, she looks 60. And I just saw a picture the other day of a 90-year-old woman who was wearing these really cute slim jeans with a blazer and spikes as big as mine, and walking. And I was like, you go, right? I don't even know what 90 looks like anymore. But the thing is that all of these generations have their own idea about how to rule the world, like how the world should be run, how the country should be run. And it comes from the era in which we were raised, because we're highly influenced by what was happening in the world when we're kids, young adults, teens, and then dating and getting into our work life. Right? What was going on in the world at the time? What were the acceptable social practices at the time? How did people speak to each other then? What was the music we listened to, the shows we watched, the people who were influencers? In my day, we called them celebrities. So it's creating a culture shock, right? Older generations look at these younger ones like, what are they talking about? Younger generations look at the older ones and they're like, what are they doing? It creates a culture clash that then gets proliferated like a megaphone through social media and digital technology. And I first started to pay attention to this. It was December of 2015. I was a senior level executive working in Hollywood. I was at one of the big studios. And the CEO decided we were going to do this big event, right, at the first week in January. It basically meant the corporate communications staff was going to work through our Christmas holiday, through our vacations. Sat the staff down, told them, and one of my millennial employees, who was in her mid-20s at the time, looked up at me and she said, but I need me time. I'm a Gen Xer. I was like, this is what went through my mind, and I'm going to give you the cleaned up version because I can't say what I really thought. I've worked through every vacation I've ever had. Business comes first. This is what we do. The company needs us. We have to show up, right? This is how you get ahead. That's not totally what I thought, but you get an idea, right? Fortunately, I saw that. I recognized that I was having this, I felt like my way of being had been attacked with that one sentence. And I caught it, and I kind of paused, and what came out of my mouth was, I understand. I'm worried we're all going to get a lot of me time if this doesn't go well. So can we work out a deal? Let's compromise. And you know what? We did, and she did a great job. I was really proud of her. She was so great. She took her vacation, and she also did some work on it. And it worked great. It went fine. And what I realized years later about that exchange is that 3 really important things happened. Because remember, I looked for the underlying cause and then how to communicate your way out of it. 3 really important things happened. I felt attacked, verbally, I felt like my way of being was being, everything I knew was being attacked in that moment, and I wanted to fight back. My automatic brain, there's this automatic system, we all have it, fight, flight, or freeze happens. My fight came out. I wanted to go, and I had to stop it, right? I had to quell that. And the second thing was that we had a common goal, she and I. We needed the event to go well so that we could do well at our jobs. And then the third thing that happened, which was really important, was that I really did understand her. I got that she was a millennial and that she was brought up differently than I did, and she had very different ideas about work-life balance than I have as Gen Xer. And those three things turned into the key of what I try to talk to people about today in how to fix this divisiveness. So first I want to, though, before I go through that, I want to talk to you about these generations, because it's really important to understand these differences and what's happening here. And plus, I think it's really interesting. So the oldest generation that's pretty active right now is the silent generation. They're in their late 70s to their early 90s. And this is the generation that was born in the wake of the Depression era. They lived through World War II plus several other wars. So to them, the government and the military are protectors and providers, and you follow them unquestionably. This is also the generation that lived through the McCarthy era. And my mother is from the silent generation. And she told me a story about when she was a kid. Her grandmother, who's Czechoslovakian, was outside in the yard, stubbed her toe, yelled very loudly in Czech what was probably a string of swear words. And my mom's dad came running out of the house and said to her, "Don't use your native language out loud. People will hear you. They'll think I'm harboring a communist. I will get fired and I'll get jailed." Now, what did my mother learn as a kid? Silence, right? That's actually why we think they have their generational nickname is from the McCarthyism. And you know what is interesting? History has a tendency to repeat itself, and I see shades of McCarthyism in what's happening with cancel culture today. People speak out, they say what they think, and then we're like, nope, that's not acceptable, you're canceled. So the next generation that's coming up is the baby boomers, right? And the boomers now are in their late 50s to early 70s. And this is a very large generation that was born in the wake of World War II when the soldiers came home from fighting, so not surprising that they're a large generation. And they are the hippies and the beatniks, right? This generation spoke out against those violent wars, and they spoke out in favor of peace, love, and equality. But they walked into a workforce that was pretty cutthroat. And so when they got into business, they became these very workaholic, competitive, kind of shark-like. And if you want a good visual of that, some of you might remember the 1980s movie Working Girl, and then also 9 to 5 with Dolly Parton. Like, these movies typified what boomer women walked into and how they dealt with it. And they went in there, they perfected it, mastered it, and then taught it to Gen X. Right? And Gen X is my generation, and we are in our early 40s to our late 50s. And Generation X is a very tiny generation, and the prevailing parenting attitude when we were younger was treat kids like mini adults. On top of that, we were the first generation to have both parents in the workforce. So we often came home to an empty house or a nanny. Right? So we raised ourselves, and we grew up fast. And we didn't really have anyone telling us how to be an adult. We just sort of watched what everybody else was doing and mimicked it. That's a generalization. But so we went into the workforce, followed the boomers, and we're like, this is how you do it? Okay, great, got it. So what happened then, Gen X now is known as America's middle child. We've got these two gigantic generations between us. We've got the boomers in front of us and the millennials behind us. And we're actually, as a middle child, we're like a bridge. We're a good translator. Hey, boomer, I get you. I lived with you my whole life. Hey, millennial, I get you. You actually make a lot of sense to me. Boomer, did you hear what millennial just said? It makes a lot of sense. Right? We're actually really helpful in the family unit and also in the workplace. And then you've got the millennials, the poor, much maligned millennials. They're in their late 20s to early 40s. They were raised in an era where people looked at it and said, we raised Gen X too quickly. Like, let these kids enjoy being kids. Let them have fun. Let them have more playtime. And by the way, if they're on a sports team, like, give them all a trophy. And don't let them, it's a game, right? Don't make them feel bad about being at a game. Just let them enjoy themselves. So millennials then brought that into adulthood with them. And they have really specific ideas about work-life boundaries, about me time, right? And all these other older generations were like, they're lazy, they're entitled. And millennials don't like that. They clap back at us on social media, right? Hashtag, okay, boomer. And the boomers hate that. So this is that like culture shock, culture clash, proliferation with technology. And then you've got Gen Z. Generation Z is think about between ages 12 and 26 right now. And this is our first all-digital generation. This generation has never lived in a world that didn't have the internet or the iPhone. And all of that connectivity comes at a price for this generation, right? They got a screen right here or right here. And all that connectivity comes at a big price for them because there are 3 issues that they have existential angst about. One of them is climate change. The other is gun violence because of all the mass shootings we've had in schools. And then the third one is equality. justice and fairness are really important to them, and that makes a lot of sense because this is the first generation that's reached racial parity. We've got 50% of them are white and 50% of them are other ethnicities. So what we know from all these generations now and from social media is that intolerance met by intolerance just leads to more intolerance. So I want to talk quickly about that three-step method I mentioned earlier because it can be really helpful. Because if you're like me, I just want to be able to sit down at dinner with friends and family members who are on opposite sides of an issue and have a conversation, have a dialogue, not a contentious debate, not a fight where people either yell at each other, throw their arms up in the air and walk out of off the table, or where other people are sitting there gripping the table, looking at their plate, going, God, please let this be over, please let this be over, please let this be over. And if you're like me, you've got conservative and liberal in your family. So I want you to imagine this. I want you to imagine you're at dinner, you've got your ultra-conservative uncle on your left, you've got your overly woke teenager on your right. And the topic of gun violence comes up because, like I said, it's really important to these teens. So you're gonna do three things. The first thing you're gonna do, and hopefully everybody at the table knows these three steps and they can all do it too, but the first thing you've got to do is just say to yourself, okay, automatic system, these are not tigers, they're not gonna eat me for lunch, I'm not gonna die, I'm just having a conversation with family and friends. It's cool, you can step down, right? If you feel that thing coming up where you kind of wanna flee the table or you wanna lash out, take a deep breath, right? Just take a deep breath, it helps a lot. So that's step number one. Step number two, say to everybody, hey, well, when we have this conversation, can we find one thing we all agree on? In the case of gun violence, can we all agree that we want the teenager to be able to go to school and not get shot? Like, can we agree? Like, we want the kid to go to school and come home alive. Chances are everyone will say yes to that, and that becomes your North Star. So then step three. Now, the thing that the automatic system doesn't respond to, like that fight, flight, or freeze system, it doesn't respond to this, shaming and blaming. So if you're like, everyone ought to own guns, and somebody else is like, repeal the Second Amendment, it's outdated, that's not gonna work. And you know what else doesn't work? Facts, science, data, statistics. The automatic system could care less. You know how you influence people? Somebody you respect, somebody they respect, says something personal about themselves and their experience with the issue. That's the way to open somebody's mind. So what you want to do is you want to be curious about the people having the conversation. Can you tell me what happened to you personally? What happened to you that you know, in your life that led you to this belief system? Like, I want to understand. The other thing you can do is help facilitate. Hey, teenager, can you tell your uncle about the story about your best friend whose cousin got shot in a mass shooting? Can you share what that was like for you and your friends? And uncle, can you tell the teenager the story about when you were a kid and you lived in rural America and there were no police, there was nobody around to protect you, and there were 2 different times when you had a gun with you and you needed to use it to save your life, right? We're not talking about changing anybody's mind here. We're simply talking about having a conversation in a way that can open up our belief system and we can have a different understanding. So I started by saying your age is the problem, but your age is also the solution. Because you want to think about who you're talking to. If it's somebody from a different generation, what's their perspective? If it's somebody from your generation, what's their past? What happened to them? And then you're going to go into those 3 steps. You're going to remind yourself, like, I'm not being physically attacked here. It's okay. I'm just having a conversation. Step 2 is you're going to find that North Star. And step 3 is to be curious and to be respectful and to be curious about people and what makes them tick. That is going to enable us to have conversations again. And if we end up meeting in the middle, terrific.